All right, I think we're live. It'll take a few seconds until it gets, looks like we are now recording and on Facebook. Great. Just waiting for the little message I get that says we should start, but I think we'll just start anyway. Okay. Hi, my name is Jon Acuff. I'm the editorial director of the Next Big Idea Club. Thanks for joining us, everyone. We're doing something new today, a virtual book launch. This is something we've been talking about doing for a while. Our mission at Next Big Idea Club has always been to connect readers and writers in powerful new ways. So we think this could be a great one and very excited to kick it off with two fantastic writers. Our first person here we're talking about is Greg McKeown. He's a speaker, author, and the host of the popular podcast, What's Essential? His first book, Essentialism, The Disciplined Pursuit of Less, sold over 1 million copies and was praised by our very own curator, Adam Grant, as, quote, an essential read for anyone who feels overcommitted, overloaded, or overworked. Adam, I see what you did there. Very nice. His new book is Effortless, and I'm excited to talk about that today. And with us as well is Jon Acuff, the New York Times bestselling author of 7 books, including Finish, Give Yourself the Gift of Done. He's an Inc. magazine top 100 leadership speaker and has spoken to hundreds of thousands of people at conferences and companies around the world. And he does strike somewhat of a resemblance to me, John. We noticed this before. Yeah. There we go. We have the same head shape. My son says I'm sort of a cereal box head.
It's a successful head shape. I feel pretty good about it.
Quality. So, John, you have a new book as well.
I have a new book called Soundtracks about
right.
It's such a good book. No, listen, that shouldn't be under. In fact, I have it right here. This is the book. Jon Acuff's book is Soundtracks. So good. Best one he's written so far. Really excellent. Love it. We should get into it as well. But it's awfully good to have Jon here with us as well. Nice to be with you.
I can't wait for this. I think this is going to be fun.
Well, thanks for joining us, guys. And so this is supposed to be a conversation. Luckily, you're both pretty adept at this. So I'm just going to jump in and out now and then provide questions asked by the audience. But feel free to just kind of talk about each other's books and the process. And, and it doesn't have to be in the book as well. It can be things that you're currently thinking about or books you have planned for the future as well.
Perfect. Well, I know that one of the things that I loved about Greg's book, because I've read it, I've got it right here. And one of the things I loved about Effortless, Greg, is that I think there's a great degree of freedom in the book. I think a lot of people are going to read it and think, I thought it had to be that way. Or, I thought it had to be difficult. Why do you think that we tend to make things harder than they have to be?
By the way, you do sound quiet to me, John.
Do I sound quiet?
Yeah, everyone's saying the same thing. Which is rare. That's rare, John.
Is it still quiet?
It's getting a little better for me.
Getting a little close. Do I have to just be like this?
Now.
Like, oh my gosh, like right on the, I'm going to turn this mic here. There you go. Is that better? Everybody's good?
Everyone's happy.
The question was amazing too. That's a real shame because the question, I came right out of the gate with some fire. Like I didn't save it. A lot of people are going to save it till the middle. I came right out of the gate. I didn't wait until turn the best wine at the end out of water. I came right out of the gate. So here's what I said.
Here's the thing. But here's what I want to talk about first. Now that we fluffed the beginning, I just want to talk about something in your book. I want to say, right, let's talk about Soundtracks for a second. Mm-hmm. But in Soundtracks, the whole point of Soundtracks, which everybody should go and buy that book, is that you're trying to get rid of all of the overthinking, all the unhelpful thinking in your head and replace it with a new soundtrack that is, that's more helpful, better to listen to and so on, right? I know I'm not doing that terrific job just there. But one of the soundtracks, it was one of my moments of like meeting of the minds between Effortless and Soundtracks, is that you chose a new soundtrack for writing. And I thought this was worth sharing because like most of the time when people think about writing, and many writers themselves sort of talk about writing in a very particular way, how painful it is, it's all the blood, sweat, and tears. There's a quote, I can't remember exactly.
The quote is, writing is easy. All you do is open a vein and bleed on the page. Like we over dramatize an already difficult thing. Like we say, like when we describe going to write, like I got to go to the coal mine. If you ever met a real coal miner, they should punch you in the mouth because it's such a crazy thing to say. Yeah.
I love that distinction. And then you chose one, a new line, a new soundtrack.
Yep.
And it was light and easy. Mm-hmm. I want you to like talk about that. I want you to talk about it because I feel like it's a great crescendo, like overlapping between these two books. And
I texted you when I saw the beginning of your book because you had that in the dedication is that idea. Unbeknownst, it was just a meeting of the minds. So 4 years ago, my wife said, as I started to write this book, you're a jerk for the 2 years when you write a book, and you're a jerk for the 2 years when you sell a book. And that's not it. Like, that's not how this marriage is going. I'd rather you be a happy plumber than a miserable writer. So we need a new approach. And I had to say, okay, I tend to over dramatize writing. I use chaos and crisis and anxiety to amp myself up to do it. And it makes me miserable to be around. So I said, okay, I'm going to.
If you're bad for the 2 years while you're writing and the 2 years you're marketing, that's the whole life, man.
Yeah, there was like a weekend when I wasn't a jerk. There was a weekend, like a 3-day weekend when I was pleasant, like I was nice to be around. But other than that, it was not great to be part of this orbit.
Gave you a time out.
Yeah. And so I said, okay, I'm going to actively work to make this process light and easy. I don't know what that looks like yet, but I'm going to write a new soundtrack because my big belief is your thoughts turn into your actions, turn into your results. So I believed I can change this writing process. I can change this marketing process. And I worked at it and it was challenging. I always say, like, fear comes free, hope takes work. Negativity will find you on your own. Like I told you, I was just reminded the other day of a surprise party I ruined like 15 years ago. My brain was like, hey, you know what you haven't thought about lately? Remember that time you ruined that person's surprise party? Let's think about that. And I was like, we're at the grocery store. Like, how is that helpful? And so I loved that you had this light and easy approach too. So when I read Effortless, I said, oh, I think there's a lot of people that think it has to hurt to be good, no pain, no gain. So I want you to segue from that into, okay, what if it could be effortless? Why do we have such a hard time believing that something of value could also be something of ease?
I think there's a few reasons, but one is like Puritanism. It's sort of just deep in the culture still that says, look, anything worth doing has to be incredibly hard. It says, that hard work is a virtue, which I think there is some truth to all of, the hard work is a virtue. But they also went beyond that to say that ease we should distrust the easy. And our language shows this: blood, sweat, and tears, a hard day's work. On the other hand, there's easy money, the easy way out. And so it creates this false dichotomy. And the idea that there's a third alternative, that you could find a path that makes the more essential things in your life easier, that you could operate at ease, and that somehow that might be advantageous, is to me is a compelling proposition. It's like a new mindset that you need to have to get there. But in fact, when you look at like all the top performance, expertise over the last 20 years, what we've learned is that this is, of course, what is necessary to be at your very best. And so you can see that within sports, you can see it within career, you can see it within almost any field of endeavor. And so just, it's like a new mantra. Maybe it wasn't just maybe it was like the 80s motivational speakers that did it to us. Maybe it's not just Puritanism. Maybe it's the 80s, just give everything. If you do everything, you can have everything, and that sort of messaging, I think is a bit of a bill of goods. We've been a little bit conned. And so we have to discover there's this other alternative, and Effortless is an attempt at that.
So what would you say to somebody, because I think that's 100% true. Say I say to you, Greg, but I've been taught that if your dream doesn't scare you, it's not big enough. Because I think that's related to that. So I say, like, but I find something I really enjoy. I feel good at it. I'm developing proficiency. I'm seeing results, but it doesn't feel like it counts because it doesn't scare me. Is it big enough? I think big enough is related to this.
I think that there is something about, you're talking specifically big. And I just want to speak just again, a little broader on like, just people, when they find something easy, often don't think it's valuable. They think, well, I have to do a career that's just, that's this fun thing, this thing that comes naturally to me, that you can't build a career around that. We've got to go build something around something that's hard for me. For it to be valuable, it has to be hard for me, which is like really backwards thinking. Value isn't about how hard it is for you. Value is in the eye of the beholder. It's for somebody else. And so, sometimes I think people choose career paths and design their lives around things that are like completely the wrong areas. You want to build it around something that is enjoyable. I mean, it's going to be hard enough. Yeah. Anyway,
the hard will be there. Don't worry. You don't have to add it. Like, it will. Welcome to the planet.
That's it. This is the context. Yeah. Life is hard, and in 100 ways. And the complication is we make it harder than it needs to be. And the implication of that is we're going to burn out before achieving the important results we're trying to achieve. So my position in Effortless is we can make a different choice, that we can seek out this path that makes the essential things easier. And as a result of that, you can achieve breakthrough results, but without burning out. And I think that's so relevant right now, because I basically think there's two kinds of people in the world, right? There's people who are burned out, and there are people who know they are burned out. And
then their hope is that there can be somebody who's effortless.
Yeah, I mean, if you can get into the second category, I think what happens, what is possible is that you start to say, well, look, I can't work any harder, so I have to find an easier path. Yeah. You know, like, I'm this way of just powering through is what got me here to this pain point. And after 16 months of the pandemic, I think there's a lot of people that have achieved results, but through grinding effort. And it's like, yeah, I can't do that for the next 16 months. I got to find a different way to do, a different way to be. And I think that there's some insights in Effortless that could be useful.
I think one of the things that helped me appreciate Effortless was I'm a public speaker. I do two things. I write books and I go to companies to talk about them. And last March, I remember texting a friend and saying, I think the first half of the year is going to be tough for people, like, which is adorable. Like the first half of the year, as if in June, you'd be like, that's a wrap. COVID's over. It's pretty quick. But I ran into a wall of reality where there was no amount of hustle. There was no amount of effort. There was no amount of gutting it out that would get people to do live events. Like I came to a very not in my control, natural end of a thing. And it was a season. I'm starting to see stuff open up again. And I did virtual events and I pivoted and all that. But I came to an end. Where do you see people that, you know, I think it's better if you can choose Effortless versus you come to the end of a thing. But if I'm, you know, if I'm starting to sense that I'm burned out and I want to choose Effortless, what does that look like?
Well, I think that it reminds me of somebody that I did a little coaching with. She's a manager at university. She's at BYU. She's the kind of person who's really conscious of working hard. Okay, that's a good thing. But she's gone beyond the place of usefulness. It's beyond even diminishing returns. It gets to negative returns for her. So she's the sort of person who's up at 4 a.m. in the morning, photoshopping for her youth group at church the next morning. Yep. No one's asking her to do that. That's just in her, I have to do it. She's the type of person who, if she even eats lunch, she feels guilty. Not, I don't mean like takes time away for lunch. I mean, just even eats it. That's because if she's not exhausted, she's not doing enough. So that's like, this is the archetype that you know, of how she is, where she is in her world. And I thought, well, if I got to be careful even how I teach Effortless, because I could overwhelm her even with that. And I thought, okay, what's one concrete thing that she can do? And I just said, look, let's start with asking a new question. You know, questions are answers. And if you can ask a new question, you can find a new answer, a new way of going about things. I said, the next time somebody asks you to do something, just pause and say, well, how could this be effortless? How could it be easier? What might an easy solution look like? So a professor calls and says, look, I need you to get your videography team to come over and record my class for the semester. And she's so well, you know, oiled for that. She just is, she goes, okay, in her head, she's going, okay, we're going to get a whole team involved. We'll have multiple angles. We'll edit it all together. We're going to have intros and outros, graphics, music. I mean, she's just seeing this whole thing. I'm going to wow him. So impressive. And then she remembers, okay, no, hold on. I'm not supposed to go down that path anymore. What might an easy solution be? And so it turns out when she asks that question, it's for one student. This whole thing is one student who's going to miss some classes for an athletic commitment. And the solution they come up with is that another student in the class will just record it on their phone and send it to him after class for the ones that he misses. The professor who hasn't seen that solution either, hasn't thought about it, is delighted. He's not like disappointed. He's like, yeah, fantastic. One less thing for me to have to worry about, a lot less for me. He goes away happy and she gets off the phone and she's just like, what just happened? Like I saved 4 months of headaches for an entire team because I asked one new question. I know that life isn't always going to be like that, but here's what I know is that if you don't ask the question, you're not going to find the answer. So this is a different path. Instead of saying, how can I work harder to achieve my results? You say, look, is there a different, easier, smarter approach that will help me to get those results with a tiny percent of the energy?
And I would argue there usually is. And I think, do you feel like one of the things that gets in the way of us asking that question is we feel lazy to even ask it, or we feel it's cutting corners? Is that one of the things that gets in our way?
I think so. I think, again, it comes back to this false dichotomy that you think it's either essential and hard or trivial and easy. And if you think it's those two things and you're driven as an overachiever, then you're going to tend to do a lot more of the first. And you're going to have that paradigm become dominant, a dominant assumption in your life, a mindset that says everything has to be on that side of things. And sometimes for others that maybe aren't so overachieving, or they're not so wound that way, sometimes they'll even get to the point where they think about an essential task, their exercise, their health, their key relationships, the things they know are essential, and it will overwhelm them before they get to it. Just the thought of it, I should eat healthy. I really should eat healthy, but that's just overwhelming. And so it's like within a heartbeat, they're doing fast food again because, yeah, it's trivial, but it's so easy. And so they're going to get pulled to the easy. So that's an alternative path. I was just coaching somebody well, I say coaching, but it's not quite right. I was on their podcast and I was doing like a turn the tables, do a little intervention with them. I was asking them a few questions. I said, what's essential for you that you're underinvesting in? And that's what he said. He said, eating healthy. And we went through a few questions. I said, well, how can we make it effortless? And he thinks for a minute. He goes, well, if I could get one of these apps that does food delivery, just to the office here. He says, what normally happens is I get hungry, don't eat. It gets into the afternoon, it's 3 o'clock. I'm so hungry, I don't have any resilience now, and I'll just go get fast food. So if the food could arrive when I was first hungry and it's healthy, and this app would do it. I said, okay, what's the very first physical step you can take, the obvious thing? And he said, I could search on Google to find one of the, whatever app would work best for me in this area. I said, what could you do in the first 10 minutes in a microburst if you spent 10 minutes after that first action? And he literally said, well, I think I can set the whole thing up. I got to put my credit card in, put what days I want it, press go, done. 10 minutes. It was like this weird moment because he physically changed. He was like, you could see him just go, yeah, I can do that. You could tell it was doable. And that's what happens. You get at ease because you say, this is possible. And I said, well, how long have you been worried about this? He says, 20 years I've struggled with this. 20 years, worrying about it but not doing it versus 10 minutes. Yeah. And so maybe it sounds all too good to be true, but I mean, that's the thing. It's like unthinkably simple, this question, this approach, but that's why it works. And so a few questions in a row there, and now he has a solution in 10 minutes to a problem that he's been stressed about, worrying about, but procrastinating for 20 years.
Do you think perfectionism comes into this? Because I always say, like, perfectionists in your life have the messiest offices and the messiest cars. And you think, well, no, they don't. They're type A. But a perfectionist, if they can't clean it down to the toothbrush level, won't even start anything. They have like empty water bottles, like a possum family in the corner. Like, it's a messy situation. And like, perfectionists I meet would rather get a 0 than a C-. So they'll say, I want to run 3 miles every day. Today I only have time for 2, so I'm not going to do any. And you want to go, well, mathematically, 2 is a lot more than 0. That person could have easily said, well, Greg, I want to eat better, so I'm going to get a scale and I'm going to start measuring weight, and I'm going to get a caveman diet, and I'm going to get a special bike they only make in Bulgaria, and I'm going to and they can overcomplicate. So does perfectionism get into this? And what do you say to somebody whose tendency is to overcomplicate the simple?
100%. And now this is a phrase, I didn't put it in the book, and you can't overuse this either. It could be misunderstood easily, but for a perfectionist, this is for real, right? If it's worth doing, it's worth doing poorly. And that just as an interrupt, because if you're someone who operates at a high standard, even your poorly won't be that bad. Yeah. And so you've got to get yourself out of the state of like constantly accelerating on your standards when you're already high standard. And so that's sort of one idea. A different way of saying that similar thing, a different soundtrack is to have the courage to be rubbish. This is one of my favorite ideas because everything starts rubbish, whether it's writing. I mean, this is so true. Everything. There's no writer that writes the first draft and it's just fantastic.
I hate to tell you this, Greg, that I wrote this book directly. They just give me the covers. Like they give me a bunch of hard covers, and I have an old timey typewriter because I live in Nashville and we like old timey typewriters. It goes right in. And I go, wow, is that, and then I drink a ton because Hemingway did that. And I own a bunch of six-toed cats. That's the other thing. That's my process. Like, I didn't want to share my process because it's a secret, but no, you're right. You're 100% right. Because like one of my soundtracks is never hold a first draft to final draft standards. So if you hold the first draft to final draft standards, you're screwed. Like you're 100% screwed. And that I 100% agree with that.
And building on that, right? Like we went just even one step further when I was writing Effortless. We said like zero draft, write a zero draft. The zero draft, no one has to see. Actually, no one will see. But it's like, just do it. You've got to have the courage to be rubbish if you want to get anywhere else. Anyway, one of the ways that I applied this, once I really named it, was I said, this is a funny way to say it, but like start a podcast about a year ago, not quite yet. It's the middle of the pandemic. We'd scheduled it. We'd organized the whole thing before the pandemic. It was going to be done with a producer, done in the beautiful area. Actually, it's a funny backstory to that. But Jimmy Kimmel had selected this area as he went through the Wheelhouse house, and he said we should do it in the shower here. It's a long story, but he's like, that's where the podcast should be. So we're going to do it there. We're going to have Jimmy be the first thing. And then the pandemic happens and we're like, okay, well, the whole plan is out. What do? Do you wait? Do you try and do it perfectly? Do you wait? If we don't try to do it perfectly, there would literally not be a podcast now. It wouldn't exist. And so instead we say, okay, we're going to use this rubbish equipment because you couldn't even buy equipment. And I was rubbish too, because I didn't know what I was doing. And so it was like, you're either going to do to learn, or you can try and learn to do. And both have their place, but this was like a do to learn strategy. And to me, that's what like Start With Rubbish is kind of about. And so, I mean, this is all like backdoor brag here, but just like 2 weeks ago, it hit like top 10 on self-improvement podcasts on Apple.
Amazing.
A week ago, top 5. And that's like, I don't want to overstate this, but it's almost like the first piece of good news about the podcast in all that time, in a sense. It's just been like a sense of like, hey man, we're just learning. This is pretty rubbish. We don't know what we're doing. Like that's not false modesty. It's like, well, we'll try it this way. We'll try it that way. We changed the name of the podcast at one point. We're like, we don't know. But like, if you want to make progress, you've got to get yourself out of the perfectionism space, because you won't, like, mistake-free living. Mistake-free living is a very bad idea.
Yeah, it's not enjoyable, and living to prevent future regret is not enjoyable. Like, I got to make so many right decisions. I can't regret this later. Like, that's not an enjoyable way. For me, it's always funny where people will say, hey, I love that strategy you did. And I'll know it was an accident and I stumbled on it. And they think like we were whiteboarding something and there was like drone footage and it was on purpose. And I'll go, yeah, well, the guy who was supposed to do it didn't show up. So then we just did it a different way. And it ended up the different way was like way cooler than the original way. And so now we're just like, my thing here, like as a public speaker, is there's a difference between talent and craft. Talent is when I say the idea for the first time, like I have a joke show up, I have an insight show up. Craft is where I hone it for the next city and the next city and the next city. And so, but like, you don't get the one without the other. And so I love that idea of what does it look like to be rubbish? Because you talk about that. Reid Hoffman in LinkedIn. One of the things you say in your book is the 10 to 20%. We want to have a 10 to 20% error because it means we're going quick. And I thought there's such freedom in that. Because I think when we look,
100%.
I would say as an outsider looking at you, you know, you got Matthew McConaughey on the podcast, Jon Acuff. I mean, they're both, a lot of people, people will say like, whoa, he gets the big gets.
That's right.
But looking on the outside, sold 1 million copies of the books, people would think, Greg doesn't do rubbish. Like there's no way he accepts that, or like, so to hear you say the opposite and go, yeah, we felt like we were making up a lot of this. It's still kind of clunky. I think there's a lot of freedom in that.
One of my favorite stories that I came across in the research for Effortless is the story of an industrialist in the UK, Henry Kramer, who says, I want to accelerate human-powered flight. This is like only 10 years before there's going to be like people on the moon. So he thinks this is an achievable thing. This is like 50 years after, after the Wright brothers. I mean, this is like great time to set this prize, 50,000 pounds. 17 years go by and no one has achieved the target, which is to fly like I think a half a mile around these 2 pylons without assistance. It's basically a bike with wings. That's what he's trying to say. Like this is what everyone's trying to solve. This is total failure until Paul McCready comes along. He's broke. He has no team compared to the competitors. The competitors have like well-funded teams. They're coming out the top institutions. The machines are elegant, beautiful, built, designed, crafted with wood and plastic and these slats and these ribs and this whole thing. And he's just like, I got my young son. He's going to be my test pilot. And he's like,
which is bold move to test the plane on your son. Bold move. Like pick the kid you like least most and just like, this is the kid.
He says everyone, he's suddenly staring at the problem and he says, everyone has been trying to solve the wrong problem. This is the breakthrough. He says, they're all trying to build beautiful machines, the very best thinking, the very best funding, all of that. He's like, the real problem is, can you build a machine that you can crash cheaply? Can you build a machine that can be crashed, mended, and relaunched in a few minutes? That was the breakthrough. And his thing, you should see this thing. I mean, it's just like, this is amateurish compared to the competitors. He said he's on record. He's like, if this thing would crash, we'd get like a broom handle and tape, we'd stick it together again and we'd be up again. Within the same day, they would have maybe 4 or 5 crashes and flights within the same flight, attempt. The competitors were taking 6 months between one crash.
That's crazy.
So the difference is that he was able to crash and learn 222 times before he was successful on 223. And the big breakthrough, and then he went on to win the second prize, which is crossing the English Channel, same thing, 2 years later, following the same approach. This idea of making failure as cheap as possible is key for making progress on the things that are essential to you. You've got to make failure cheap. And there's a variety of ways you can do that. But if you can do that, if you can make learning-sized mistakes, then you can accelerate far faster than somebody else who's still sitting around. It has to be perfect. I know somebody who wanted to start a podcast the same week that I started the What's Essential podcast, and they bought the equipment and they haven't started it. A year on, why? Because it's going to be perfect. They're overthinking it. They want it to be just so, and that's fine. I mean, I'm not really trying to knock them at all in saying it. I just want to contrast the power of finding this lower risk, get rid of the perfectionism, definitely progress over perfectionism if you actually want to make progress on the things that matter most to you.
I think there's certain things that cause, certain endeavors, and a friend of mine, I've been talking about this, where it triggers it really quickly, that fear. And one is logos. I have a friend that I've been talking with, and he wants to launch something, but he wants to get the logo right. And I've been telling him,
logos. I think you get logos like the philosophers,
Oh no, gosh. I want to take this a little headier, Greg. No offense. The airplane story wasn't smart enough. I mean, I heard the bike. nobody cares about bikes.
That's what I thought you'd say. But logos, I go, logo. He's getting obsessed.
No, I mean a logo, like a shiny ornament you put on an envelope. No.
Right.
But I told him, call the logo your year one logo. Because what happens is you go today, and I think that's part of one of the lies that prevents people from writing books, prevents people from building platforms, launching podcasts, whatever, that people go, you have to find the perfect niche. You have to decide right now what the entire thing is going to be about. And you have to be about a certain type of bird that's only in a certain type of Oklahoma and have a niche. And you have to know for the next 5 years, that's your podcast. And you go, that feels really intimidating. So how do you, on a practical level, say, we use podcasts as an example. I'm watching this and maybe I want to write a book. I've always thought I want to write a book, or I want to start a podcast. And what's the first step, or what's the next step? So it's this weekend. Greg McKeown just got me excited. He's British, so I trust his ideas faster than John's, which is such an advantage. It's true. We talk about it all the time.
Only saving grace.
That is, you could read a laundry list and I'd be like, man, he has some good things to say about socks. You British people, it crushes. I love the accent. But this weekend, okay, I want to take what Greg shared about tonight and work on it this weekend. What do I do?
Well, I mean, let's ask a few questions to make execution easier. What does done look like for you? Like, just get clear about that. There's the most amazing story about this. I mean, I don't want to go too deep into this. Actually, I will, because it's such a great little story. The Vasa is a ship that was built in Sweden. By the King of Sweden.
I love this story. So good.
He just keeps on changing the criteria for done. He never says what done is. Okay, first it has to be 65 feet long, then 75, then 135, then 165. In between, people keep cutting logs. They keep doing, eventually his changes are so stressful, it's said to have killed the shipmaker. And like the second in command takes over. And so now they're trying to make progress again. And then towards the end of the project, or what proved to be the end of the project, is he said, listen, I just want to put on like 700 statues, because it's just got grander and grander in his mind, and bigger and bigger. And they did this. The ship was never finished ever, but there was a date established for when the VIPs were going to come from all the other surrounding areas to see this juggernaut of a ship. And so what is planned is that the ship is going to come out and sail, not properly tested, not fully finished, and they're going to have a gun salute for all these VIPs. And so they do that. They come out, a gust of wind grabs the Vasa and pulls it over. And because all the cannons are open for this gun salute, the water just suddenly gets into it, pulls it down. Within 1 hour, the ship is at the bottom of the ocean, kills 53 people. And this thing that has taken years, decades to build, literally goes 1 mile and is over. And so this is the dramatic example of like, what does done look like? Like, actually choose, okay, and it doesn't have to be the final thing, but like, what is done, and we're going to get there, and then we're going to have learned, and we'll get to the next level. So first question, what does done look like? Second question, what is the first obvious step you can take on making progress? Not the 100th step, the very, very first one. So you say, hey, I want to write a book. Well, no one writes a book. You cannot write a book. You can open a Google Doc and start typing, right? Like, that's a physical thing. You can open a Google Doc and name it. That is the first thing. Think of the very first physical step. My favorite example of this is the co-founders of Netflix. They have this grand vision for like being able to download videos all over the world. They see this, but they know the technology isn't there. That could take 10 years to do it. Their approach could have been, listen, we're going to have a 10-year business plan. We're going to raise $1 billion. We're going to, which
would have been fictional, by the way. If you think you can plan 10 years at a time, it's pure fiction. Like, nobody planned 2020. Nobody was like, you know what? We got the greatest minds together. This is how 2020, like, anytime somebody tells me their 10-year plan, I think that is so cute. That is just so cute.
To me, it's a perfectly reasonable thing to have long-term goals and intents and so on. You've got to let them, you've obviously got to have them in their place. And so for them, what they finally decided they do, they say the very first obvious thing we can do is we're going to go and buy a CD. Like, they literally go buy one, put it in an envelope at the post office, and mail it to themselves to say, okay, can you get a CD arrive without breaking it? Like, can you do that? Because if we can't, there's no point even starting this business. Like, that is the thing. And that was their first step. And they found that was, yes, it could be done. And they were like, okay, well, maybe we have something. Maybe we have a disruption to Blockbuster. And of course they did. So I think that's the second question, is what's the first physical thing you can do?
So what does done look like? First physical thing.
First physical step, the actual first little step that you can take. I think the third thing that you can say is like, what's the pace I'm going to take? How can I find the effortless pace? And specifically what I mean by that is to have a lower bound, very minimal, very realistic, achievable lower bound. Like, what if you said, like, I started a journal while ago, and I said, okay, minimum bound, 1 sentence a day. Upper bound is the key, because as overachievers, we're like, well, lower bound, fine, at least a sentence a day. But then the mistake we make is on the other side, we say, okay, well, this is day 1, 3 pages in the journal. When you start the book, and day 1, you're going to try, okay, I'm going to spend 10 hours on this. That's what it takes. That's what I've been told. I haven't given enough effort. I'm going to just
go to the coal mine. Go to that coal mine.
Go to the coal mine. And then you get to end of day 1. And of course, even if you did it, and even if you did make progress, what you've done is you've burned yourself out. It's too much. Day 2, you're like, well, I can't do 10 hours. It's too much. And so you've burned yourself out psychologically before you even begun. So have an upper bound. So with the journal, mine was 5 sentences, no more than 5 sentences, until this is such a deep habit that I never think of not doing it. And that was 10 years ago. And I'm pretty confident that I haven't missed 1 day in a journal in 10 years now. And that was because it was an upper bound. It's not because I superhuman effort. It's not even in this sense impressive at all. It's just have an upper bound so that you can keep going with it. Somebody told me this. Now I know we're jumping around between books and journals and podcasts just to illustrate, but somebody just recently told me something like that like 90% of podcasts launched die within 3 episodes, right? Like by 3rd episode, they don't do it anymore. They're like, okay, I'm out. And of those that survive, only 10% of those survive past episode 20. So like literally, one of the most important strategies for success will be that you just are still doing it. On episode 21, that you're still there. Like you are already that far ahead of all those competitors because you're still here. So how can you make it sustainable so that you're not giving just, this is the human curse, is that we're intermittent. We do it one big and then we're out. Yeah. And so if you can get the right pace and really have the discipline not to go further. I just started swimming again. Like that was the COVID. They shut down the pools in our area. They opened them up again. And last time I swam, it was like 100 lengths. That's not too bad. The temptation is to jump right back in at that. And I'm like, no, I don't want to do 100 today. I probably could do it, then I'll feel ill. And I won't want to do it.
And you won't ever swim again.
Exactly. So 40. And every day after that, for like a week, I just did the same, 40, 40, 40. Even though I felt like doing more. Every day after the first day, I was like, oh, come on, time to do 50, time to get back up there. No, do 40. And so then again today, I hadn't done it for a week. I've been traveling. Back today, just 40. I could have done more. I wanted to do more. But again, you just hold it back because I want to be there 6 months from now still doing it. I want to be swimming 20 years from now. So you got to get it so that it's achievable so that you can do it even on the days you don't feel like doing it. So that's another thing I think people can start doing is an upper and lower bound.
I love that. And I know that we've had some good questions. I don't want to hog all the time tonight with I think a lot of people find these to be amazing questions. So I feel good about them. But are there any questions that we want to answer? Ponyo, are there any that you'd say, oh, so-and-so asked a question. There's a great audience. I've already seen a bunch of fun chats. So is there a question that popped up?
And while you're doing that, Ponyo, let me just be explicit to everybody here. Like, put something. Don't be shy now. Put something in the chat. What questions do you have on the subjects that we're on? We want to make this as relevant as possible. So do that while Ponyo's launching us here.
I'm going through here. There's some great questions, and you've covered a lot of these sort of obliquely, sometimes directly. One that I think is quite relevant is from Lisa Seidman. She says, for me, work is my #1 priority. When I finish with my day's work, I crash on the sofa playing a game on my iPad. How do I get motivated to tackle everything else on my to-do list instead of putting it off for days, weeks, months, and years?
That's a great question, Greg. I look forward to your answer. Much like Lisa, I look forward to this.
Well, here's when I hear that, I actually, there's a kind of sort of a red flag in there, even about like, well, work is the priority. I'm like, that catches me. I'm not saying, hey, you're wrong about that, to do that, but it just catches me as like, oh, that's interesting. And if we were having a conversation, I'd want to double click on that to understand that a bit more. I think the thing I will say to you is that you want to be able to create like a slingshot life. rhythm and style. And what I mean by that is that you work, yes, but then you need to have a period of recuperation. And that isn't just, I mean, I'm also not knocking like spending some time on whatever device, but like if a person is doing things in their relaxing time that doesn't really relax them, doesn't really give them recuperation, they won't spring forward. They won't feel like the next day full of energy. It'll get them in a slightly plateauing process experience. And so what I would encourage people to do is to learn, especially for overachievers, to actually learn how to relax. That relaxing is a responsibility. And another way of saying that is that relaxing is a capability, like a competence. And for most overachievers, they have no competence in this. Like, they don't know how to do it. So the moment they're not working, which they do know how to do and they have competence for, it's actually a very uncomfortable experience. It's not something that, oh, thank goodness I get to relax. It's like this, I don't know what to do here.
Your skin itches. You feel itchy. That's the main.
Yes, yes. And so you want to get back to, I'll just check email again. I'll just go online. I'll just learn something. I'll just do something, do more email. What I think you need to do is like start at zero, right? I don't know how to relax. Admit that. I don't know what to do. And you start making a list. Anna and I, my wife and I, have made a list now of 20 things. The first list wasn't super great, specific list, but it was a list of things that relaxed and was rejuvenating to us. So her list is totally different to mine. And they, you know.
What's on your list? Like, give us one on your list.
Yeah.
Like the most private and personal, actually.
I like playing tennis. That's like a thing. I'm not good.
It's a great one.
But I like playing tennis. My son plays tennis, and so he and I will go. He'll come in and tell me, "Hey, do you want to go play tennis?" And I'm not talking like go for a couple of hours. We'll go play for 15 minutes maybe. And so that is something that's relaxing for me. That's fun, and doing it with him. And this gives me an opportunity to make a distinction here too between there's chores, there's habits, and then there's rituals. And those are three important distinctions. Chores are things that are important, but we don't like them at all. Habits are things that we might like or not like, but the point is that they're now routine enough that we don't have to think about whether we're going to do them or not. So that's the advantage of that. But then that's different to rituals. Rituals are like habits with a soul. Habits are what you do. Rituals are how you do them. And that really matters because what you can do if you can create the right rituals is that they're enjoyable in and of themselves. You like doing them because they've become fun, because there's something that uniquely for you, they have a little signature to them, the way you're doing that is fulfilling. And so that can be applied beyond relaxing, but that's the idea, is start a list of 20 things. And at first they're just sort of items, things that you're observing about yourself. You have to have some self-awareness. But over time, Anna just gave me a list the other day of like, she got down to sort of 5 or 6, and every one of those now are like really good. They've become little rituals. They're specific things that she can do. I mean, one of hers is like dancing with me for a few minutes, not like for a long time, but just like a few minutes of dancing to connect. That's something that's on there. Reading a specific fictional book, sitting in bed at a certain time, drinking tea, like that's a little ritual. Now that doesn't actually sound good to me, to be honest. That's not on my list, but it's about finding those unique things that are like signature relaxing rituals. I think that's what you want to do when you're not in the work period. Get competent at work, get competent at relaxing in order to have this spring forward effect in your life.
I love that. That was a great question. Are there any others you want to jump into?
Yeah,
I have a bunch.
Great one.
I've got so many, but if you have some good ones, I thought
I
Lisa
got a great one
that.
from Marion Spears. I think a lot of people resonate. This one resonated with a lot of people in the chat. As you move to an effortless focus, how do you communicate the switch to your stakeholders, your family, your team, et cetera? This is a huge switch for us who are over-focused.
Yeah, I would just say, like, don't do it alone. That'd be my main message to you is don't sort of just go, like, Effortless is really countercultural. And it's probably more countercultural than I realized it was when I wrote it. And so it's almost like learning a new language. If you start like operating in in an effortless mindset, in an effortless way, it could be that other people are like, well, that's what are you doing? I don't understand. They can't speak that language yet. And so I do think you want to probably introduce the language of effortless. Like you be explicit a little bit about it. Say, hey, listen, I've been exploring this question. Like, how could we make this effortless? Even blame the book. Like, in the name of effortless, what if we asked this question? Or like, what if we did this a little differently? Like, I'm not sure how to apply this yet, but like, let's talk about it. So the goal is, I think, not to suddenly transform everything and change everything in your life. It's to try and introduce a new language and a new conversation that you can have with the people around you. And I mean, obviously, this is a good place to say this because of this is a sort of extended book club experience that we have with the Next Big Ideas book club, and it's like, do a little book club if you feel confident and comfortable enough to do that. If not, just start having it in the conversation. But if you're comfortable, get people to read it together as a team. You don't have to be the expert then. You don't have to be the one defending it. You can disagree with something in the book, just have the conversation, discuss it. Where would this relate for us? How would this be helpful? What doesn't apply here? What wouldn't work in our reality? If you can just have that conversation, you've done something very profound because you've created space for a conversation that wasn't happening before. And that's the beginning of change. That's what culture is. It's what you can and can't talk about. If you can introduce a conversation that you couldn't have before, you've already changed the culture. That's what I would say is like a pretty good place to begin.
Well, and the other thing I'd add to that is it doesn't have to be all or nothing. So I think the temptation is you read a book, you discover Effortless, you read something and go, I'm all in and I'm changing everything tomorrow. And so you have a spouse, you have a team, you have a whatever, and you go, I'm sorry, I have these 37 new things that I'm doing and they start right now. And you go, that's where you give people whiplash. And so I think the idea of saying, okay, here's a thing that I'm going to try and I'm going to introduce it to my staff and here's what I'm going to work on versus going like, I always, will joke with when I speak at a conference, don't call your staff from this event and tell them everything is changing. Because sometimes they're at the event and the staff back home can the hair on the back of their neck is standing up because they know that the CEO, the leader is going to come back and go, I just heard this idea and everything's crazy. It's all changing. And it makes everybody resistant. Nobody likes whiplash when there's life change, whether that's inside of a marriage, whether that's inside of a company. So I think that was a great question.
Yeah. And also just like, you don't want to try and introduce effortless in an overwhelming way. Right. Like the irony
which would be the opposite of effortless. Like if you like,
yeah, exactly.
I want us to relax we have to be the best at relaxing. I joke with Greg about that. Like we're such a stressed out culture. We score our sleep. Like you can fail while you're asleep. You can wake up in the morning and already feel like a failure because you go, man, I suck at sleeping. My sleep stats are I thought I was doing good. Look how bad I suck at sleep. So there's already enough pressure to that. You shouldn't add, we have to be the best at relaxing. And Greg and I joke about that because my wife said I was a workaholic and I needed a hobby. And so I said, well, I like ping pong. Maybe that's on my list. And I ended up hiring a ping pong coach from a certified ping pong coach. And I immediately sucked all the joy out of ping pong as a 7-year-old elderly man from mainland China threw ping pong balls at me and yelled, kill, kill, kill to train me for, I don't know what. I'm 45. What am I training for? Like the senior Olympics for ping pong? That's and I had to go, I did it again. I did the thing where I do a little and then I make it everything. So I think you can pace it. I love your use of the word pace, Greg.
Okay, so I see here, there's some people put stuff in the Q&A versus the chat. Man, somebody at Zoom needs to sort that out and just have one thing, I feel like. But there is a question here from Stephen Covey, which is pretty cool, right? So when have you felt burned out? Which Stephen Covey is it? That's what I want to know. Stephen, which Stephen is this? Is this Stephen Covey the fifth? There's 5 Stephen Coveys, by the way. That is true story. Okay, when have you felt burned out in your careers? What has helped you to get back on your feet or become unburned out? John, over to you.
I'll start. I took 4 years between my last 2 books. I wrote a book called Finish about finishing goals because 92% of all New Year's resolutions fail. And I was curious about that. And then I took too long between the books and I got creatively stuck. And so I did 2 things. I did a 2-night comedy show where I forced myself. I'd said for years, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. And I finally decided to do it. 60-minute comedy set took me months to write. And it was stuff like every time I see somebody with a bumper sticker that says my dog is smarter than your honor student, I think, how bad was your high school? Like, I've never met an honor student that throws up and then eats their own throw up. Like, your dog is awesome. It's not smarter than an honor student. So I wrote a bunch of funny jokes. And then I wrote a 50,000 word rubbish book that hopefully no one will ever see. I had to go to a coffee shop, work on a project, actually wrote a book, really put myself into it just to get out of that mode. And then the other thing I did for burnout is learning to live within my limits, learning to not see a limit as failure, but as a limit as a gift. The limit isn't failure, the limit's a gift. And so now, whether that's my body going, whoa, 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 we're getting closer to the edge, whether that's my spouse going, hey, here's, we're getting closer, we're close to the edge, or I kind of have a couple. And then in soundtracks, I think one of the best things in the book was something somebody else said, which I had a friend named David Thomas say, we want negativity and stress to be a switch. We want to find one switch and turn it off. And we think it'll be turned off forever. So we look for yoga, and we do yoga for a month, and then the stress comes back. So we go, no, I need another switch, another switch, another switch. And he said, life isn't a switch, life is a dial. And when the dial gets to 11, you have the ability to turn it down. So what I teach and what I use in my own life are what I call turn down techniques, similar to Greg's list. That's why we have so much overlap. And that's why it's so fun to support each other. I go, these are my turn down techniques. And when I find that life is at an 11, when I find like maybe I've made the book my identity and I'm wrapped up in it too tight, maybe I've made reviews my identity, success my identity, whatever, it's at an 11. What are the things that I turn the dial down to? Because it's not a switch, it's a dial. And when it gets to 11, I have the permission and the ability to turn it back down. That's how I kind of think about burnout.
I really like that. And it's also the word that keeps coming to my mind is you're saying about, it's like the intelligence to turn it from 11 down, like to not think about limits. I like the idea that you see that as a benefit, as sort of a blessing. It's also intelligence. When you start getting up to limits, that's like, all those people, those internal triggers, that's all intelligence speaking, going, hey, just letting you know you're going off the road. It's like the same as like the smart cars that like you're going off the road, it's going to give you a ding. It's like, you want to listen to that. No, I'm going in that direction. I'm going to keep going. Well, you can do that, but you are going to crash. And that's what these factors are here to help you to do, is stay on the path. And really, that's a big part of the key to our conversation today. You don't want to peak, at 30, 35, at 40, at 45. Like, you don't want to be peaking. You want to be on the long journey where you can keep contributing for decades and decades. You look at someone like David McCullough. I called him up. I don't know David McCullough. I called him up.
Which is a gift. You told me you have the gift of finding people and connecting with them. That's something that you enjoy that.
I forgot I'd said that to you, and it's true.
I remember, because right here, right in this heart.
I love that, and it's an unusual thing to even share that, but that to me is true. It's like, it took me a long time to even think about that as like even something unusual or helpful. But I did. And I spoke to his wife, which was lovely. Just thanked him for his contributions. I mean, here is someone who he was never trained as a historian. Every book he's written, now this is like 2 Pulitzer Prize winning books came out of his work, including 1776. One of my favorite books is John Adams, and nobody knows about John Adams before he wrote this book, hardly. And it's a magnificent showing of a father and a son, and how that, what their relationship was as well. And they're one of the only presidents with a son that that was also a president, and just amazing stuff in there. Anyway, he's just made contributions all through his life. He didn't. And so what you want is not to, I did everything and I won, but I killed myself for the long journey. You want to be in the game for 10 years, for 20, for 50, you want to be making a contribution all through your life. And so I think that it's to how to operate today, not just to maximize and optimize this moment, to optimize the longer journey. I think that is really important.
Well, and I would say, Greg, one of the things that I've seen you do, because we've had the chance to become friends, which has been really fun, is I told you I talked to another leader who studies leaders, and I said, why do they implode? Why do leaders fall apart? Why do influencers fall apart? Why do they, blow up sometimes? And he said, it's two things. One thing is it's isolation. They get isolated. They don't have a relationship. They're not connected. The way I say it is leaders who can't be questioned always end up doing questionable things. Like, show me a leader who ended up doing something questionable. I'll show you somebody who couldn't be questioned. But the second thing he said was they have people that tend to fall apart, don't have life-giving hobbies. They don't have a hobby that gives them life. And when I asked you that, that was evident. You said, okay, I love tennis, but you also said, I love my kids. My kids are my hobby. And I think sometimes that's not a side of somebody who has a book, who has a platform, whatever, that we get to see. And we joked that I've never met, a 13-year-old who said, my dad wasn't around, but I have a really cool bike. Like, and it was worth it. Like, this bike has front and rear shocks. Like, I don't know my dad. He doesn't know me because he was at the office 100 hours a week. I don't know my mom because she was at the office 100 hours a week, but I have a really cool bike. I think you've done a really deliberate, hobby of being part of your kids' lives. And so I'd love, I know we're drawing to the end, but I think that's a side of you a lot of people don't get to see often. So I'd love you to talk about that a little bit.
Let me talk about that. And by the way, the answer came in at Stephen Covey V. Thank you for being here. It's always fun to have you here. He's got a great podcast too. My goodness, and I'm fluffing on the name of it, but
I think it's called Cinco Covey is what it's called.
It should be called Cinco. Write it in there, Stephen. We'll put it on here. It's paradigm shifting book, something like that. People should go and subscribe to that. Yes, kids. So I had an interesting experience with this actually. I went to a conference where one of the other speakers had us go through this exercise where you had to meet the person next to you and introduce yourself, right? Like, give them the, that awkward conversation. Oh, what do you do, right? And so the person asked me, what do you do? And I hate answering that question as it happens, but the answer I gave is I say, well, listen, what I do is I'm married to Anna and we have 4 children. And I live in California, and that's what I shared. And then the second thing the exercise was, so we didn't know what the second step was until we'd done the first. They said, okay, now go and Google the person you just spoke to, right? Because the idea was, does what they said that they do match their digital persona? So it's like a marketing conversation, like, is this in alignment? And so normally what they're trying to assess is well, did the career they just stated, actually, is there any evidence? Have you made sure that your website, everything matches this? But in my case, because I'd answered it in a slightly different way, it was really insightful, but in a kind of opposite than intended way. And it was like, yeah, there's no family stuff out there. There's the same blasted this photograph from essentialism. There's like everywhere, like that picture's everywhere. Everyone thinks it makes me look everyone thinks I'm short from it. Anyway, whatever, that's fine. But that was a good moment for me. I thought this is like a huge part of who I am, of what I do. It's more important to me than my professional work by a country mile. And so, like, to me, when I say it's my hobby, it's like, yeah, this is where I want to be investing the time and the energy, because this is what's essential. At the end of this life, when I'm not going to be sitting on my deathbed, oh my goodness, I should have just responded more emails.
They'll talk about your books. They'll be like, man, he was on so many bestsellers lists. Even USA Today, like he was on that one. That one.
Imagine that when you're literally there in the hospital room. Like, what are they going to say? Who's going?
What was his Amazon ranking? He got up in the top 10. He got up in the top. There was a children's book with a swear in the title. It was a coloring book, but he got there. He got there.
I love that. And actually, that's funny. That's funny because I had completely forgotten about this because we've enjoyed it so much. But I literally immediately before this thing got a call from my editor from Italia that it made the New York Times bestseller list. So
congrats! That's amazing. That's huge.
It's 2 for 2. It's a big deal.
That's awesome.
You know what that means. And so I'm very happy about that. Very relieved about that. And delighted. I did the dance of joy. Actually, that's a good way of combining the conversation because literally when it happened, my kids were unbelievable. But they are like this. Their culture is something really unique now. And like they're all around me. We grabbed a video of it. They're like, "What is the news? What's happening?" And so I tell them, and And they just, the sound, the way they reacted, the sound was just electric.
I love that.
And I just thought like it was so precious to me that was the reaction. I know not all families are like that. And I know that, I know that from my own personal experience too, that it wasn't the same as this. And so like investing in them and in that relationship is just like, it feels like it's just beginning to pay dividends because now, and I'm not saying that life is always easy for us, there's plenty of disasters. We have plenty of stressful times and times when I think
a bunch of your kids smoke. I think I remember you saying that, like they're all smokers, which is weird. Unfiltered, even unfiltered. Lucky strikes. You're a lucky strike family. We're talking
right now. It's like I used to think the teenage life for the time when they were teenagers was going to be miserable. I really thought like, oh man, this is going to be tough. And then we have our moments. But really, compared to what I thought it would be, it is now. It feels so much more effortless than I ever imagined it would be, and that's because it is this. Because we've been through hard times too, and times that unified us, and so we have that perspective and that culture to be grateful in good times and bad. And so we just make a fuss. I mean, every night we raise a glass. Like we will literally do toasts almost every night at dinner. Like whatever the success of the day has been. And so it's very in the culture. So it's not like competitive and well, if that person gets a big cheer, then I'm left out. Like there's a lot to go around here. And so anyway, I somehow muddled my way through.
No, it wasn't a muddle at all. I thought
the news.
I think that's a great place for us to put a pin in it. Because Greg and I will talk for hours and hours because these are books we love. It's so amazing that people joined us tonight. There's a million things you can do. Everybody's got a really full schedule. So I'm just appreciative that I got to be part of it. Really appreciate the Next Big Idea Club letting Greg and I come on and talk about this. It's been a blast.
John, you made the sacrifice to be here. You didn't have to do this. I appreciate it so much. It's always so fun and super fun to do this. Sometimes, as we know, sometimes these things don't feel quite this effortless, this fun. And you've been a delight. You've made it easy. And Panio, thank you so much for hosting us, for making this possible. We're very happy to be a part of your community as well. And of course, huge thank you to everybody that's been here. As John, you already said it perfectly. You have so many other things you could do. Different depending where you are in the US. You probably interrupted other things and made sacrifices to be a part of it. I hope it has been useful. I hope it has been valuable. And if not that, a little entertaining along the way. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, guys. Thanks for coming. It was fantastic.
I'm going to do that awkward thing where you wave goodbye on a Zoom video now. So goodbye. Goodbye.
Like kids, it's like kids television from years ago.
Yeah,
I'm doing this.
Hey, soundtrack. New York Times bestseller.
This is
Reprint this cover. New York Times bestseller. Congrats, Greg. That's awesome, dude. All right, see you guys.
Thank you, everybody.